This is part 7 of chapter 9, The Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn. Institutions. A total institution was defined by Irving Goffman in asylums as a place of residence and work where a large number of like-situated individuals cut off from the wider society for an appreciable period of time together led an enclosed, formally administered round of life. Because inmates of such institutions such as nunneries, prisons, mental hospitals have limited contact with the world outside and therefore no reference points outside of the institution, their supervisors can control not only their actions but the stimuli they receive and the way they respond to their environment. The institution can shape behavior by rewarding approved traits and discouraging others. Brown asks, in Techniques of Persuasion, whether the communists have devised any method which is half as efficient in brainwashing or with results that are half as permanent as the English public school. Public schools whose pupils are traditionally drawn from the sons of the moneyed classes do much to further the socialization effects that Tauch has described, whereby early experience and indoctrination is reinforced when an individual proceeds to mingle with others who have shared a similar upbringing. Corrective institutions, however, can go further in the name of therapy. An American program designed to reform juvenile delinquents was described by Packard in The People Shapers. Youths who embarked on what was called the SEED program were isolated from their friends and families and lived as a group where they were stripped of their old identities and given a lowly position in a very organized hierarchical structure. The seedling could only advance up the hierarchy by learning to think right in the reformers' terms. Older seedlings on the program subjected the new seedling to intense peer pressure to conform and watched him to make sure he didn't backslide. Seedlings who could inform on a renegade were suitably rewarded. One seedling was quoted as saying that an older seedling even came with him whenever he went to the bathroom. The program was so criticized because of its effects that it became the subject of a U.S. Senate hearing. One school counselor testified that when the seedlings returned to their old schools, they were certainly reformed, but they also seemed to be like zombies and refused to associate with any children who had not been seedlings. She said, seedlings seem to have an informing system on each other and on others that is similar to Nazi Germany. They run in to use the telephone daily to report against each other to the seed. The program was discontinued. In 1961, the American Federal Bureau of Prisons held a conference for associate wardens to which speakers on behavior change and reform were invited. One was Edgar Schein, who spoke on the thought reform techniques used in Korea. Schein said that he thought the tactics themselves were legitimate. It was the ends that were suspect in the Chinese case. Later he changed his stand and said that were he to give his talk again, he would advise against the use of such tactics in prison as a means of reform. Whether the information he provided in his talk had any bearing or not, a program very similar to thought reform was instituted in Marion Penitentiary in Illinois. A petition submitted in complaint to the United Nations Economic and Social Council in 1972 listed all the similarities, such as segregation of prison leaders, the encouraging of prisoner spying on prisoner, tricked statements, undermining of emotional supports, placing prisoners in ambiguous situations to create confusion, the use of humiliations and insults, the rewarding of submission, and the fostering of the illusion amongst isolated prisoners that each had been abandoned by his social peer group. Both programs were carried out in the name of therapy and in the belief that the values and standards being imposed on the victims were those that right-minded individuals should hold. Sometimes the ambience of an institution can influence behavior in an unsuspected and unintended ways. John McVicker, in his autobiography, written while on the run from prison, claimed that the prison system could not hope to be reformative because, in effect, it served to romanticize the hardened con. Young prisoners were more likely to identify with the tough long-termers than with the prison warden. So, the spurious image of the glamorous macho life of the hardened criminal was perpetuated rather than dissipated. Life in prisons and on long-stay wards and mental hospitals can lead to institutionalization, as it is now called. Years on end spent in the same environment without any real stimulation can reduce a person to a vegetable. This is exactly what was recognized to have happened to mental patients in the 50s, a discovery which led to a new approach to psychiatric care. Patients used to sit all day on drab wards with nothing to do. They had no need to take any responsibility for themselves, as all meals were provided, beds made, and no living had to be earned. The patients became utterly dependent and incapable of initiating any action for themselves. In mental hospitals today, patients are encouraged to take responsibility for themselves and to participate in occupational therapy of various kinds, but in some hospitals, particularly mental handicap hospitals, overcrowding and poor staff levels still work to deny patients the attention they need as human beings. Often the result is the development of disruptive behavior patterns purely as an attention-getting means. As Hinkle pointed out, in the context of prisoners under interrogation, lack of stimulation endured during confinement can adversely affect the brain and speed its deterioration. We are shocked to read, for instance, of a brilliant scientist who for a long time has been held the captive of a hostile government and returns to the world a broken man, incapable of carrying on his work. Yet in old people's homes everywhere, people are being precipitated into senility because they are starved of the stimulus of a changing environment. They may look at bright curtains instead of cell walls every day, but the effects are largely the same. In such ways, institutions can manipulate as a result of well-intentioned ignorance rather than malicious design. Institutions and organizations of all kinds, by their very nature, need to establish rules, hierarchies, permitted modes of behavior in order to fit all their members into their framework. Whereas an institution may be created initially to meet the needs of a certain group, eventually the needs of the institution itself overtake those it was designed to meet. Thus trades unions become vast unwieldy beasts with decisions taken at regional and national levels far removed from their members. The 1981 election for a deputy leader of the Labour Party in Britain revealed that the larger trades unions were so out of touch with their shop floor members that they lacked even the machinery to consult them. Institutions teach conformity and obedience to authority, using ascent up the hierarchy as the accepted and conventional reward. Innovations within firms such as worker directors or power sharing are doomed to failure if old conditioning is not replaced by new training. Ensuring chaos is seen as proof that a new system can't work, instead of being seen as evidence that the social attitudes need to be changed before a system is altered. Institutions that one elects to join, such as church organizations or commercial corporations, may instill more conformity to social norms than any corrective institution can achieve. For the individual effectually exercises the choice to join and therefore the choice to conform. The amorphous, ubiquitous they who control things were once the boys at the bottom. And that ends chapter 9 of The Manipulated Mind by Denise Wynn, and we will pick up with chapter 10, Resisting Influence.